The fall of Earth. The sky was on fire. Captain Elias Ward stood atop the shattered remains of a skyscraper, watching as massive Imperial dreadnoughts hovered over the burning ruins of New Geneva. Their cannons roared, sending bursts of plasma into the city below, incinerating entire blocks in an instant. The resistance had fought to the last man, but the battle was over. Humanity had lost. His earpiece crackled. "Elias, we're evacuating the lab. You need to get here now." Dr. Helena Carter's voice was strained, but not panicked. She was deep underground in Resistance Command, trying to finish what little work she could before the Empire reached them. Elias turned from the wreckage and sprinted down the stairwell. His rifle clattered against his armor, the smell of smoke and blood thick in the air. Resistance fighters were scattered through the building, some wounded, some reloading, all with the same grim expression. This was their last stand. "Captain," a soldier called as he passed. "They've breached the perimeter. 5 minutes, maybe less." Elias didn't slow down. He reached the basement level, where a reinforced tunnel led to the lab. A pair of guards let him through. Inside, Helena and her small team of scientists were working furiously at a terminal. "Tell me you've got something," Elias demanded. Helena didn't look up. "Not enough. The virus isn't ready. The relay isn't strong enough. I can't shut down their fleet." "Then what can you do?" She hesitated. "I can send a message." Elias clenched his jaw. He had hoped for a miracle, something that could cripple the Empire's war machine, turn the tide. But if all they had left was a warning, then that would have to be enough. "Do it," he said. She nodded and activated the transmission. Somewhere, out in the far reaches of human space, remnants of the fleet still remained. The outer colonies had gone dark when Earth fell, but if they were alive, they needed to know what happened here. They needed to know what was coming for them next. The lights flickered. A deep, mechanical rumble shook the ground. The Empire was here. "We're out of time," Elias said. He turned to his men. "We hold them here. Give Helena as much time as we can." The Resistance fighters took position, raising their weapons. The doors burst inward as the first wave of Imperial shock troopers stormed in. Blue-white plasma fire lit up the room, and the battle began. Elias dropped to one knee, firing short, controlled bursts. The first trooper fell, then another, but more poured in, their armored forms moving with brutal efficiency. His soldiers fought hard, but the numbers were overwhelming. A blast hit the wall behind him, sending shrapnel into his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and kept firing. To his right, one of his men screamed as an energy bolt tore through his chest. To his left, another went down in a hail of return fire. The Resistance was dying. Helena's voice cut through the chaos. "Transmission sent." Elias turned just as an Imperial soldier lunged at him, knocking his rifle aside. He twisted, drawing his knife, and drove it into the alien's throat. The trooper gurgled, collapsing. Then the second wave came. Explosions rocked the lab as the Empire brought heavier weapons. Elias saw Helena being dragged away by 2 troopers, her face set in defiance. He tried to reach her, but a blast caught him in the side, throwing him to the ground. His vision blurred. The last thing he saw before blacking out was General Zivos stepping through the smoke, a satisfied smirk on his alien face. Elias woke to silence. The battle was over. The lab was in ruins. He lay buried under a collapsed beam, his body aching, his head pounding. Through the rubble, he could see the sky, dark, filled with the distant silhouettes of Imperial ships patrolling their new conquest. Earth had fallen, but deep in the void, Helena's message was racing toward the last free humans. The spark of vengeance. Elias Ward pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, breathing slowly. Outside the ruined building, an Imperial patrol marched through the debris-strewn streets, their heavy boots crunching against glass and rubble. Their guttural voices carried through the night, barking orders in a language that had become all too familiar since the fall of Earth. He tightened his grip on the stolen plasma rifle. He and his squad of 5 had spent weeks surviving in the ruins, striking where they could, vanishing before the Imperials could pin them down. They were ghosts in their own city now, hunted, starving, but not broken. Through the scope of his rifle, he watched as the lead soldier, an 8-foot-tall brute in segmented armor, scanned the area. They're getting nervous. The resistance wasn't supposed to exist anymore. According to the Galactic Empire, humanity had been pacified, its will shattered. Elias smirked. Let's prove them wrong. He made a quick hand signal. His team fanned out, silent as shadows. A few moments later, a small explosion erupted in the distance. The Imperials turned toward the blast, weapons raised, exactly as planned. Elias fired. The first shot took the lead soldier in the neck, sending him crashing to the ground. Before the others could react, his team struck. Plasma bolts lanced through the night, cutting down 3 more troopers before the rest could regroup. The survivors scrambled for cover, shouting in their alien tongue. Elias sprinted forward, closing the distance before they could react. He slid behind a wrecked vehicle and lobbed a grenade over the top. A flash of blue light, then silence. His squad moved quickly, stripping the fallen soldiers of their weapons and gear. Every stolen rifle, every scavenged power cell was another tool to fight back. They had to move before reinforcements arrived. The Empire never left an attack unanswered. A war they cannot see. Across the ruined cities of Earth, the embers of resistance smoldered. Small bands of survivors struck Imperial convoys, sabotaged supply lines, and assassinated key officers. It was a war of shadows, fought not with grand armies, but with knives in the dark, with bombs hidden beneath Imperial patrol routes. General Xyvos, the architect of Earth's conquest, watched the reports with growing frustration aboard his flagship, the Sovereign Wrath. He had expected some level of resistance in the aftermath of the war, but this was something different. The humans were not just surviving. They were adapting. Xyvos turned to his second-in-command, a calculating officer named Varric. How many of these insurgents have we captured? None alive, sir, Varric admitted. They fight to the last man. And when we do recover bodies, they carry no identifying marks, no records. It's as if they don't exist. Xyvos clenched his jaw. That was the problem. The resistance was not acting like a traditional military force. It wasn't an army to be crushed. It was an infection spreading through his occupation forces, killing them one by one. He turned back to the holographic map of Earth, studying the red blips indicating the latest attacks. Increase patrols. Execute hostages for every fallen soldier. Make them understand the cost of defiance. Varric hesitated. Sir, we've already purged entire districts. It hasn't stopped them. Xyvos's fingers twitched. He had crushed dozens of civilizations in his career, but no species had ever resisted like this. Not after losing their homeworld. The humans should be broken. Instead, they were only growing more dangerous. He exhaled slowly. Then we are not being brutal enough. The message reaches the stars. Light years away, in the hidden human colony of Persephone 3, a small group of officers huddled around a crackling transmission. Helena Carter's voice came through, weak but determined. Earth has fallen. The Empire thinks it has won. But we are still here. We are still fighting. If you receive this message, do not wait. Do not run. We strike now, or we die as slaves. Admiral Jonas Hale, leader of the scattered human fleet, listened in silence. He had feared Earth was lost, but now he knew resistance still burned. And where there was resistance, there was hope. He turned to his officers. We mobilize every ship, every fighter. We strike their supply lines, their transport hubs. We don't let them dig in. One of his commanders hesitated. Sir, their fleet still outmatches us 10-1. Hale nodded. Then we'll have to fight 10 times harder. The room fell silent. Then one by one the officers nodded. The Empire thought the war was over. The unseen war. A new kind of battle. Elias Ward crouched in the shadows of a ruined office building, watching the Imperial supply convoy roll through the streets below. The massive hovercraft, flanked by armored troopers, carried fuel cells and weapons for the enemy's war machine. They were about to lose it all. He tapped his earpiece. Teams in position. Confirmed. A voice crackled back. Detonators are set. Elias exhaled slowly. Weeks of careful planning had led to this moment. The Empire had brought overwhelming force, But brute strength wasn't enough to hold the planet. They needed supply chains, stable infrastructure, fear. The resistance was stripping them of all three. He raised his hand. The signal. An explosion ripped through the street, flipping the lead hovercraft into the air. The blast wave sent Imperial troops scattering. Before they could react, resistance fighters opened fire from the surrounding buildings. Elias squeezed a trigger, his plasma rifle spitting blue bolts into the chaos. One trooper went down, then another. The Imperials fought back, but they were exposed, panicked. Another explosion rocked the street. Smoke and fire swallowed the convoy. The fuel cells ignited, sending a chain reaction of destruction through the Imperial ranks. Elias grinned. Perfect. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the convoy was gone, and so was the resistance. The Imperials would find only bodies and burning wreckage. No clues, no survivors to interrogate. Just as planned. Terror in the Empire's ranks. Aboard the Sovereign Wrath, General Zivos stood before the latest casualty reports. His hands clenched into fists. Convoys destroyed. Officers assassinated. Entire garrisons wiped out. This was not mere resistance. This was war. They are coordinating, Varric muttered beside him. They hit supply lines, disable communication relays, sabotage our food stores. Zivos already knew that. He had spent decades conquering worlds, but this was different. The humans fought like no enemy he had ever faced. They did not fight for territory or glory. They fought to break the Empire from the inside. Have we identified their leaders? He asked, voice tight. Elias Ward is still alive, Varric said. We suspect he's behind most of the attacks. Zivos' expression darkened. That name again. The resistance captain should have died in the fall of Earth. Yet he had become the architect of their rebellion. And the scientist? Dr. Helena Carter remains in custody, Varric said. She refuses to speak. Zivos considered this. Carter was dangerous, not because of her weapons, but because of her mind. He had reviewed her past work, cybernetics, AI warfare. She was the kind of human who could turn the tide of a war with a single breakthrough. Perhaps she already had. We need a demonstration, Zivos said. Burn a city. Make them watch. Varric hesitated. We've already leveled 3. Then make it 4. The sleeper awakens. Deep within an Imperial prison ship, Helena Carter sat in her cold metal cell, staring at the floor. She looked weak, broken. Exactly as they expected her to be. She wasn't. The Empire believed their chains could hold her, that their threats could break her. But she had sent the message. She had done her part. Now, she only needed time. A soft chime echoed in her ear, an almost imperceptible sound. But to her, it was everything. The virus was ready. Helena allowed herself a small smile. The AI worm she had built was subtle, designed to burrow into the Empire's systems, corrupt their networks, disrupt their fleet communications. It had taken weeks, but it had finally reached critical mass. The Empire thought they were hunting a resistance. They didn't realize they were already infected. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Execute." The Empire's first defeat. Across the galaxy, Imperial ships flickered. Control panels went dark. Weapons systems glitched. Entire fleets found themselves adrift, unable to receive commands. On Persephone 3, Admiral Hale watched the readings with satisfaction. The virus had spread faster than expected. The Empire is blind, his lieutenant reported. Their long-range comms are down. This is our chance. Hale nodded. Launch the fleet. Hit every outpost we can. The humans struck like lightning. Hidden ships emerged from asteroid fields, launching precise, devastating strikes on Imperial bases. Fighters darted through the void, tearing through unprepared defenses. For the first time since the war began, the Empire was losing ground. The real war begins. The trap is set. General Zivos stood on the command deck of the Sovereign Wrath, eyes fixed on the holographic star map. The resistance attacks had escalated beyond mere terrorism. In the past week, 3 key supply stations had gone dark, and an Imperial fleet had vanished near the Persephone system. He clenched his jaw. They're bolder than I expected. Varric stood at his side, his posture rigid. They fight like predators, sir. They don't take territory. They strike where we are weakest, then disappear. Xyvos exhaled slowly. He had underestimated these humans. That mistake would not be repeated. Order the fleet to Persephone, he commanded. We'll crush their forces in one decisive strike. Varric hesitated. Sir, with respect, what if this is a trap? Xyvos turned, his red eyes burning with cold fury. Then we spring it, and we rip them apart. The battle for Persephone. In the void of space, the Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace, their warships blotting out the stars. They expected an easy extermination, outnumbered human rebels with scavenged ships. Instead, they found chaos. The moment the sovereign wrath entered the system, everything went wrong. Their targeting systems failed. Communications flickered. Engines stalled mid-flight. The virus had spread deeper than Xyvos had realized. Then the first human torpedo struck. From the asteroid fields and planetary shadows, hidden warships emerged. Human vessels outfitted with stolen Imperial tech, their weapons burning with the blue fire of vengeance. Fighters weaved through the gaps, striking at disabled cruisers, slicing through hulls before Imperial ships could react. On the bridge, Xyvos gripped the railing as his ship shook under impact. Find me a firing solution, he barked. Sir, we've lost half our fleet's targeting systems, an officer shouted. We're. The ship lurched violently as another blast tore into its side. Xyvos's mind raced. He had thought he was crushing the last remnants of humanity. But this was an organized, premeditated counteroffensive. The war had not ended. It had only now begun. Elias Ward's last move. Aboard the human flagship Vengeance, Elias Ward stood alongside Admiral Hale, watching the battle unfold. For months, they had worked in the shadows, striking, retreating, preparing for this moment. The Empire had walked into their trap. The sovereign wrath is crippled, Hale said. They're trying to retreat. Elias's expression was stone. We can't let them. He turned to his comms officer. Launch the boarding teams. Across the battlefield, human dropships surged forward, dodging enemy fire as they latched onto Imperial hulls. Resistance fighters stormed through breached airlocks, fighting room to room. Elias led the charge onto the sovereign wrath, his rifle raised. They had fought in the shadows long enough. Now, it was time to take the war to the enemy's heart. Xyvos false. The corridors of the sovereign wrath were chaos. Smoke and alarms filled the air as human fighters cut through Imperial defenders. Elias moved with ruthless precision, his squad pushing toward the bridge. The door loomed ahead, thick, reinforced, but not impenetrable. Set charges, he ordered. A moment later, the explosion blasted the doors inward. The bridge was a storm of smoke and shouts. Xyvos stood at the center, his crimson cape torn, his hand on his sidearm. Elias leveled his rifle. It's over. Xyvos bared his teeth. You think this victory means anything? The Empire is infinite. You are nothing. Elias stepped forward, eyes cold. We were nothing. His finger tightened on the trigger. Now we're the ones hunting you. A single shot rang out. Xyvos collapsed. The bridge was silent. Then a human officer spoke over the comms. The Imperial flagship is down. The fleet is retreating. A roar of triumph echoed through the human ships. A new war begins. On the burning bridge, Elias stared out at the battlefield. The Empire was wounded, but not dead. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a war for vengeance. Beside him, Helena Carter's voice crackled over the comms from her freed prison ship. You took our world, she said. Elias nodded, his eyes on the retreating enemy fleet. Now we take yours.